Hello. So we are continuing with Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers. We are in Perek Vav, chapter 6, which, as we mentioned last week, is wasn't traditionally part of Pirkei Avot. It was added at a later time. It's part of a section of rabbinic teachings called Baraitot, and these are teachings that were not included in the Mishnah, and they are all on the theme of Kinyan Torah, acquiring Torah. And the reason that this sixth chapter was added to Pirkei Avot in the Mishnah was because from the end of Passover until Shavuot, there were 6 Shabboses. And the idea was that each week, on Saturday afternoon between Mincha and Mariv, people would study one of these chapters. And by having a 6th chapter, it led you to the festival of Shavuot. And of course, Shavuot is all about Kinyan Torah, about the Jewish people receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai. So the themes generally of the 6th chapter are all about Torah, whereas in Pirkei Avot, while some of that is true, we also see ethical teachings as well. The other thing we mentioned is that generally in the 6th chapter, we've got much longer teachings. In the Mishnah, the idea was to be as succinct as possible, so very short things that you could memorize. Okay, so last week we did chapter 6, the first Braita, and today we come to the second one. So if you've got a Sidur, it's either 6th chapter, second Braita. If you have Lev Shalem, then we're on page 258. So we start this way. Amar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. Yehoshua, son of Levi, used to say the following: B'chol yom vayom, each and every day, bat kol, literally a daughter of a voice. It's translated as a heavenly voice. It's a rabbinic way of perhaps saying this was a message from God. You know, initially, when God wanted to communicate to people, he would often pick a prophet and he would speak to that prophet. Sometimes, like with Moses, it was face to face or voice to voice. Sometimes it was in a dream. And in rabbinic times, we assume that prophecy stopped sometime around the year 500 BCE. And the rabbis who come the 1st century, the 2nd century CE, they ultimately speak about a bat kol, that this was like a magical, mysterious voice that seemed to come from heaven, that if it was not God himself, it was a representation of what God wanted to communicate. Literally, bat kol, daughter of a voice, but a heavenly voice. So every day, a bat kol, a heavenly voice, yotzeit mehar chorev, comes or is heard from Mount Chorev. Mount Chorev is another name for Mount Sinai, obviously the place where the Torah was given. Umachrezet ve'omeret, and it proclaims and it says. So if you happen to be in the Sinai and you happen to be near Mount Chorev, each and every day you would hear a voice coming seemingly from either the top of the mountain, from heaven, that would say this: Oy lahem, woe unto them, labriot, to humanity, me elbonah shel Torah, for having contempt for the Torah. Why? Shekol mi she'eno osek b'Torah, anybody who does not busy himself or engage in the study and the learning of Torah, nikra nazuf, is called, the word is nazuf, okay? The word nazuf means detestable, or something that is so disgusting that you want to put it away, right? Loathsome, revile. Here they say detestable. Now, again, just because Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says this, it's so. Obviously, we're going to need more proof than that. And as we've seen all along in Pirkei Avot, the highest proof you can give is to quote a verse. Better if it's from the Torah. If not, then from the rest of the Bible. So he's just said anybody who doesn't learn Torah is disgusting, detestable, loathsome, to be reviled. Prove it. Okay, I'm going to prove it. So he says, and he quotes a verse. The verse is from Mishlei, which is the book of Proverbs, chapter 11, verse 22, where there's the following proverb. Nezem zahav bi'af chazir isha yafa b'sarat ta'am. So what is this verse? A gold ring in the snout of a swine is a beautiful woman lacking discretion. Okay, so here's the idea. First of all, remember that much of the book of Proverbs it's wisdom literature. It's aimed for the upper middle class. It's mostly a secular book, giving wisdom to rich kids before they inherit their father's estate, teaching them what to do, what not to do. And so here in the book of Proverbs, it says, you know what, if you've got a beautiful woman, but she lacks discretion, okay? In Hebrew, it's ta'am, right? Could be taste, but not just in the sense of vanilla and chocolate taste. Ta'am, knowing what's right and what's wrong. It's more than just what kind of, which fork do you use at a fancy banquet? It's more in life, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, okay? So a beautiful woman who doesn't have that, in other words, a beautiful woman who everybody stops and stares at and is jealous of or wants, right? But if she doesn't have ta'am, she makes stupid mistakes, more than stupid, dangerous mistakes, morally dangerous, right? What is she like, this gorgeous woman who's always doing the wrong thing ethically? She is like a chazir, a pig that has a nezem zahav, a gold ring in its nose. So the filthy, the smelly, the disgusting pig, right? You're putting a gold ring in its nose. It just doesn't fit. Similarly, a gorgeous woman who constantly is doing wrong things, bad things, inappropriate things. That's what she is like, okay? So what's going on here? Remember, what Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi was telling us is that if you are if you don't study Torah, you don't commit to learning Torah, you are nazuf, right? You are detestable. And I can prove it because remember the proverb that said a gorgeous woman without ta'am is like a pig with a gold ring in its nose. Whoa. What has any of that got to do with study of Torah? And, right, it just doesn't seem to follow. So what you need to know is Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi is, in this particular piece, he's going to give us 3 mini sermons. And each one is based on a play on words or some kind of pun or a trick. So remember, we're dealing with the word nazuf, okay, which means detestable. Where does he get that from? So what happens? He says, remember, we've got nezem zahav, a gold ring in the af, in the nose. So what has he done? He's taking something that a procedure, a technique in rabbinics that's called notarikon. Notarikon is sort of like an acronym where we take a word stands for more than one word. It becomes an abbreviation. So nezem is a ring, and af in the nose. So if you take nezem, right, and if you drop the mem here, and then you take the word af, nose, and you drop the aleph, you've got nazuf, nezem from ring, and af, nose. And you remember, we were taking parts of the words and we're combining them. So we get the word nazuf. To Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, nazuf, detestable, is actually a reminder. It's a hint about nezem zahav be'af chazir, about the gold ring in the nose of the pig. So clearly, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi wants to show how clever he is and is playing around with words. Here's the question. Was he serious? He said, yes, this is what was intended when the book of Proverbs was written. They meant that you take those 2 words, you combine them, and that tells us that anybody who doesn't study Torah is detestable. I'm not so sure that's what Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi was thinking. I think what he was doing is he was teaching by entertaining. He was pulling off a trick. Now, whether he was doing this for kids or whether he was doing this for adults, maybe he was doing this in synagogue for adults, maybe he was teaching one of his classes for either scholars or maybe for simple people, but he's being very clever, right, in pulling from the book of Proverbs, and yet he's making his point. Right? So people would say, wow, that was clever. That was cool. Now, whether it's true, doesn't have to be true. It's something that stops you in your tracks and you say, wow, I never thought of that. Nezem, Zahab, Ba'af, Nazuf. That was good. He did good, right? He got my attention. Something that I'm going, because you can't get that picture out of your mind of the pig walking around with the golden ring in its nose, right? So he succeeded. Every time you think of that picture, you're going to remember his little sermonette, and you're going to remember his point was, you don't want to be nazuf. You don't want to be like a pig with a gold ring in your nose. So therefore, you better study Torah. Okay, so that's quite clever, and he does well. Okay. And then he gives us another little sermonette, one-liner, and he says, Ve'omer, and it also says, V'haluchot ma'aseh Elohim hema, V'hamichtav michtav Elohim hu, charut al haluchot. So we need to go back to after the giving of the 10 Commandments, in the book of Exodus, chapter 32, verse 15, 16. And so it says, thereupon Moses turned, went down from the mountain, bearing the 2 tablets of the pact, meaning the 10 commandments. Tablets inscribed on both their surfaces. They were inscribed on the one side and on the other. Okay? The tablets were God's work, and the writing was God's writing. And now, here's the key point, incised upon the tablets. In Hebrew, the word for etched, incised, is the word charut. Charut. And the Torah itself says, Moses comes down, he's holding these tablets, which God himself wrote on, and it wasn't just using a magic marker on stone. What it was is a chisel and a hammer. These were engraved, incised. He cut into the stone. And that's what the word charut means. The Torah says the words on the 10 commandments on the tablets were incised in stone. Okay, so charut al haluchot, incised on the tablets. Al tikra charut, and now Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, don't read it what it really says, charut, incised, Ella, but rather you should read it as cherut, okay, which means freedom. Now, here's the thing to remember. The Hebrew language basically doesn't have vowels. Vowels are something that comes to Hebrew much, much later as an aid to read. And in fact, when little kids learn Hebrew in Israel, you learn it with vowels, but sometime along, elementary school, vowels disappear. And in fact, in Hebrew books, Hebrew newspapers, you don't have vowels. The exception is poetry. Poetry, it's critical that you know how to pronounce something, and often poetic language is more highfalutin, and often people might not recognize the proper pronunciation or word. So poetry always has vowels, nothing else does. Books, newspapers, no vowels. And people, when you're a kid, you learn it with the vowels, and at some point you don't need them anymore. You recognize the words. The Torah says that Moses comes down with the tablets, which were charut. The letters were incised charut with a little t under the chet. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, trying to be clever again, says, since there aren't vowels in the Torah, just letters, and these are the letters, instead of reading charut, which was clearly what the Torah was trying to say, we could read this as cherut, right? The word cherut means freedom. Some of you may know that Menachem Begin, Israeli prime minister in 1977 and on, he was from the Likud party, but originally his political party, going back to pre-state days before 48, the name of his party was Cherut, right? Spelled H-E-R-U-T. Cherut, meaning freedom. And for many, many years, he was the leader of the Cherut party, the Cherut movement. And it became Likud because Cherut was never going to win an election, so they needed to join with other parties. And they joined with what was then called the Liberal Party, and they became Likud, and that's how they're known till this very day. But Cherut means freedom. So remember, the original verse says the following: The tablets were the work of God, and the writing was God's writing, charut, graven, incised upon the tablets. Do not read graven, but rather freedom. In other words, read it that when Moses came down there, with the tablets, the writing represented freedom on the tablets. Not that the letters were incised, but the letters equaled freedom. Now, what's he getting at? Right? It's a clever pun that he's making by changing the vowels from the little t, the kamatz, to the two dots, the che. Right? So what's going on here? Many people probably think that Torah, halacha, Jewish law is constricting, that it takes away your freedom. Hey, if I follow the Torah, I can't work certain days, I can't eat certain foods, I can't do certain things. You're handcuffing me, you're restricting me. Why would I want to voluntarily choose a lifestyle that just tells me no, 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 right? And many people opt out because they say, as long as I have the choice, I choose not. I choose not to do those things. I don't want to be told on Shabbos, you can't flick the light, you can't work, you can't write, you can't buy something. Right? I don't want to be told you can't eat that, you can't eat here, you got to wait 6 hours for this. My whole life is no, 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 don't do this, don't do that. That's a serious problem, right, for many Jews. And the truth of the matter is that the majority of Jews who have today, we certainly have, the autonomy to make our own choices. The majority of Jews say, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to be restricted. I don't want to be held back. I don't want to be told no. Okay? So Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi is coming to try to deal, I think, with this feeling that law is all about no. And in this very short piece, he's bringing an incredibly brilliant counter idea, which is that law frees you. It doesn't restrict you, it frees you. Okay, here's an example. There are people today who say, you can't tell me I have to wear a mask, right? Or you're going to throw me out of the supermarket. You're not going to let me into, a store or a restaurant. I have my First Amendment rights. Nobody can tell me what I have to do, right? That's a very strong feeling that some people have today. Other people say, look, we have to restrict our own autonomy or else we're going to die. I mean, can you imagine? I'm driving down the street and all of a sudden the light turns red, right? Imagine what would happen if people say, I don't have to listen to that. I can do whatever I want. I'm going to look both ways, and if it's clear, I'm just going. We all know that if you tried to live in a world like that, without any restrictions, we would soon all be dead. So you're driving down the street and you see a speed limit, 30 miles, 55 miles, whatever it is. Clearly my car can go over 100. But I think we understand that if your rights aren't impinged upon and everybody does whatever they want, everybody's going to crash into each other and we're all going to be dead. So to some extent, it's critical that you need to have restrictions in order to be free. That's an incredible paradox, but it's true. Somebody has to say, you can't do this, right? And it's not because somebody's trying to control you. It's because somebody's trying to protect you, to save you, right? You have to give your kid a vaccine before you let them into school. I don't believe in vaccines. Well, you're going to come in and you're going to infect and maybe even kill other children in the class, right? So society ultimately says that it's law that seems to restrict us, but actually frees us. I know I can send my kid to school and know he's not going to get the measles and die. And that becomes a very powerful thing. So if it works in the realm of secular life, does it also work in the realm of religious life, right? Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi obviously believes that. So, a classic example, a modern classic example would be, okay, on Shabbat, traditional people are not allowed to use their cell phones. And you say, but I want to use my cell phone. I want to check if I got any emails. I want to see what's happening in the world, right? But the idea is, if we stop for a moment and we think about that restriction on using electricity or using your cell phone, for instance, in a sense, might free you from the craziness, the addiction that our electronic devices have imposed on us. And so there's no sense anymore. It's 5 o'clock, work is done. I can leave it until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. In the world that we live in, with our computers and our phones, you're basically working 24/7, unless you basically say, for 24 hours, beginning at sundown on Friday, I'm putting my phone down and I'm not picking it up and I'm not going to look at it. Okay, people will always say, but what if there's an emergency? Okay, we always make exceptions for emergencies, and there's ways of dealing with that. But life is not an emergency all the time. So what Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi is saying, what you think is a restriction is actually a way of freeing you from some of the terrible things that work or society or culture or whatever impose upon you. And again, where does he get this sermon from? He could have just gotten up and he could have said there in the 3rd century, you people, you in the back at shul there, who's taking out your cell phone, I see you over there, and you're, besides breaking our rules, and besides bothering the people behind you, right, with your constant cell phones, you're losing out on something incredible. Put it away. Breathe. Enjoy life, right? Leave the world behind for 24 hours. So how does he do that? Instead of just getting up and giving the sermon, Yoshua ben Levi says, you all know the verse about charut incised upon the tablets. How about this one? Cherut al haluchot. Freedom is on the tablets. Okay, so, and then he comes through with the punchline, she'ein lecha ben chorin, you do not have a person, no person is free, ella misha osek b'talmud Torah, unless you engage, you busy yourself with the learning and the study and the obedience to Torah, you're not free. And then he gives us one more sermon bit, right? And also a play on words. And as a matter of fact, it happens to be a verse from this week's Torah portion that we're going to read this Saturday morning in Chukat. So he goes like this. V'kol misha osek tadir b'Torah. Anybody who regularly engages in the study of Torah, hareze mik aleh. This person is exalted. Okay, so if you don't, you're like a pig with a golden ring in your nose. You're not going to be free unless you study Torah. And if you do study Torah, you will be mik aleh. You will be exalted. Okay, Rabbi, where do you get that one from? And again, he's doing a word game here. In this week's Torah portion, in the book of Numbers, okay, it says the following. We are in chapter 21, verse 19. And so here's what the context is. The Israelites are traveling through the wilderness. And from there to Be'er, they came to a place called Be'er, which is the well where the Lord said to Moses, assemble the people that I may give them water. And then we're told that the Israelites at this well in the desert sang a song. Spring up, O well, sing to it. The well which the chieftains dug, which the nobles of the people started with maces, with their own staffs. Okay, and from Midbar to Matana. So they come to this place, they dig a well, they sing this song to the well, they sing this song of thanks to the water, which saves them. And then the Torah goes on, and then they moved from Midbar to Matana. And then listen to this, verse 19. And from Matana to Nachliel, and from Nachliel to Bamot. And then in verse 20 it ends, and from Bamot to the valley that is in the country of Moab, at the peak of Pisgah, overlooking the wasteland. But it's verse 19, this seemingly meaningless, from a GPS, which says, from Matana to Nachliel, from Nachliel to Bamot. That's the whole sentence. This is the Holy Torah. And basically, it's saying they went from A to B to C. Very few people who read this pay much attention because we can't identify today those places, Matana or Nachliel or Bamot. Right? So it seems like just some meaningless three places in the desert that no longer exist. Why should I care about that? But Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says, wait a minute, this is the Torah. Everything is of significance. Everything is of meaning if you know how to look. Remember, in the end of chapter 5, we were told, Hafoch ba v'hafoch ba dekula ba. Turn it upside down, inside out. Everything you want to know is in the Torah. So what I thought was this meaningless itinerary from Matana to Nachliel to Bamot. That's the whole sentence. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says, no. It's not just three places. Maybe it was three places, but it's something much more. What is it more? Okay, and so here he's making puns with using these three place names. So the first one is matana. Now, the Hebrew word matana, in context in Numbers 21, it's a place name. But the actual word matana does mean today gift. Okay? So the gift of the Torah. The second word, second place name, is Nachliel. Nachliel literally means in modern Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, the inheritance of God. In other words, something that God has given you, right, which will now become central to your life. So again, matana, gift, Nachliel, inheritance of God, and Bamot, the third place name. But Bamot also means a high place. Bamot, similar to the word bima, right? We come up to the bima to stand before the Torah. So whereas 99% of people read verse 19 as this meaningless trip itinerary, Matana, Nachliel, Bamot. Move on, doesn't do a thing for me. To Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says, the Torah is a matana. It's a matana from God, so it becomes your inheritance. And indeed, if you accept this matana, this gift, if you accept this inheritance, what will it bring you? It will bring you to Bamot, to a higher place. And remember, what Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said was, you harezet mit aleh. You will be exalted, exalted from the word aleh, aliyah, up. So he's relating the word al, aliyah, oleh, mitaleh, going up, exalted, with the word bamot, high place. And that's where he gets his sermon. And once again, it's not important whether this is true or not. What he's done, right? So again, a deeper question is, when God wrote the Torah, did he mean that the Jews, he's telling us they went from A to B to C, or was he saying not only did they go from A to B to C, but A, B, and C, the names itself, the words mean there's a message here. Figure out the message. I'm not buying it, although traditional people might. What I'm buying is Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi was an incredibly clever sermonizer. And he gave the people things, images, ideas, jokes, puns, word games that they would remember, right? So this guy comes home and his wife says to him, Nu Shmuel, what did the rabbi say in his sermon today? You know, and the rabbi said, he gave a great thing. It was about this pig wearing a ring in its nose. Right? Or he says, there was this verse that I thought was just stupid, but listen to this one. Matana, Nachliel, Bamot, you were given the gift of Torah, and it becomes your inheritance, and it will lead you to a higher place. This is something that you can remember, right? You could tell somebody else about. So Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi is this incredibly creative sermon giver. And here in this second Braita, what he has done is he's given us 3 mini sermons. My guess is that when he delivered them, it was probably much longer, much more thought out. But when they copied it down, right, and attributed it to him, they reduced it to 2 sentences, which is great because now I've got the essence of his teaching. Okay, we're moving on to the third Braita in chapter 6. Halomei mechavero, somebody who learns from his friend, Perek echad, 1 chapter. O halacha achad, or 1 law. O pasuk echad, or 1 verse. O dibur echad, or 1 word. O afilu ot achad, or even 1 letter. If you learn from somebody else a chapter, a law, a sentence, a word, even a letter, tzarich linhog bo chavod, you are obligated to show him, pay him, honor him with kavod, with respect. By the way, how is it possible that somebody, I get it, that somebody could teach you a chapter, a law, a sentence, maybe even, what does this word mean? How could somebody teach you a letter, 1 letter? We might think, well, somebody said, I forgot from Hebrew school, is it the dots on the left? Is that the S or the SH? Of the shin or sin. Dot on the right is the SH, dot on the left is the sin. Is that right? Right? No, right? So we could get that. There's also another possibility. It wasn't just teach me this Hebrew letter. There are also, and the examples that are given, is that the prefix in Hebrew, ve, and, okay? Most people learn in Hebrew school, ve, as a prefix, always means and. But the truth is that ve could also mean but, okay? So if it means and, it's one thing. But if it's ve means but, it means something very different. And includes something, but excludes something. So you might have thought ve in this particular case means and everything else is included with what came before it. But maybe your friend will teach you, no, you misunderstood. Vav in this case means but. It excludes everything that comes after the thing that came just before. So there's a good case where somebody taught you one letter, right? The meaning of one letter. So if somebody teaches you any of these things, chapter, verse, word, letter, law, you have to honor him. Shekain matzinu b'David melech Yisrael. For we found in the case of David, king of Israel, shelo lamad me Achitophel. Okay, and I'm going to get to him in a minute. He only learned from Achitophel, ela shnei dvarim bilvad. He only learned two things from this guy Achitophel. V'kara'o Rabbo, and he called him Master, Rabbo, my rabbi, Alufo, my guide, Umiyuda'o, my dear friend. Now, how do we know that David called him that? So if you go to the book of Psalms, and if you look in Psalm number 55, and verse 14 in Psalm 55 says, and remember, the rabbis assume that King David wrote the book of Psalms. Whether he did all of them or not critical right now. David wrote in this psalm, "It is not my enemy who reviles me. I could bear that. It is not my foe who vaunts himself against me. I could hide from you. But it is you, my equal, my companion, my friend. You're the one who turned against me. Sweet was our fellowship. We walked together in God's house." Right? So, although he doesn't mention names here, the psalmist says, you know what was the real knife in my heart? That the person who went against me was my friend. If it was my enemy, I would have understood. But it was my friend. And again, here, the words are, but it is you, my equal, my guide, my dear friend. Now, if you just read that here in Pirkei Avot, but it is you, my equal, my guide, my dear friend, out of context, we don't know that it's somebody saying, a person who was my friend is the one who stabbed me in the back. And that hurt even more than if anybody else had done it. So what's the story behind this? So if we're in the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 15, we read about a rebellion. You know, David had many sons, and ultimately Solomon, the youngest of the sons, becomes the king and takes over for David. But there were other sons who were older, and first there was Amnon, but he was murdered by his brother. And the brother who killed him was Absalom. And ultimately, Absalom decided to rebel against his father and to, instead of waiting Who knows? Maybe it was because David decided, you killed your brother, you're not going to, inherit the crown after me. That should have gone to your brother that you killed. You're out. Maybe that's what led Absalom to rebel against David, or it could have been all sorts of other things. By the way, why did Absalom kill his brother Amnon? You may remember a couple of weeks ago, we read about love that's based on a thing, right? And there we are talking about Amnon's obsession with his half-sister Tamar. He raped her and then couldn't stand her, wanted to get rid of her. And so Tamar's full brother Absalom ultimately gets revenge by killing his half-brother, the rapist. Okay, so that's the story. Absalom is young. He's very beautiful, good-looking, handsome. He's got long, curly hair. Right? The girls, swooned over him. David, in the meantime, is getting on in years. He's older. What happens? David is ultimately forced to flee for his life. And at this point, Absalom decides, okay, what do I do now? So Absalom went to one of David's old counselors, advisors, and he said to him, and the man's name was Achitophel. In English literature, there's a very famous poem by John Dryden that's called Absalom and Achitophel. But actually in Hebrew, we pronounce Achitophel as Achitophel. And what happened was Absalom goes to Achitophel, who used to be David's advisor, and now has sided with Absalom. And Absalom says to Achitophel, what should we do? And Achitophel says, don't delay, strike now. David is weak, he's on the run, he's fleeing. Go after him, crush him, kill him, and the throne will be yours. Well, David sort of had a sense that that's what was going to be the advice, because he knew Achitophel. Achitophel had been his friend, his advisor. So what happens? David sends another advisor named Hushai. And Hushai is sort of sent as a kind of a spy. And so Hushai shows up and he pretends to Absalom that he's going, he's leaving David. He's also joining the rebellion. And he says, my good friend here, Achitophel, said we should strike David right away, immediately, crush him, kill him. What do you advise me to do? And Hushai, who was really sent by David and working for David, says, that would be a mistake. You see, right now, you don't have the strength. David is on the run. What you need to do is to wait, to draw all your forces together. And when you are as strong as you possibly could be, that's the moment to strike. If you do it now, there's a 50-50 chance David could overcome us. Wait, build up your army, gather reinforcements, and then go after David. So at that point, Absalom thinks about it and he says, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And of course, in delaying and in waiting, David had time to escape, to regroup, and then to come back against Absalom and ultimately defeat him. When Achitophel realized that his advice to Absalom, strike now, wasn't being followed, right? He realized we're doomed. David is too smart. He's going to come back after he regroups, and this rebellion is never going to succeed. So what did Achitophel do? Went home, wrote out his will, and he hanged himself, committed suicide. Ultimately, because Hushai had told Absalom, wait, gather your forces, build up your troops. David had time, turns around, comes back. He defeats the rebellion. And of course, in the very famous story, as Absalom is now on the run, and as he's going through a thick forest trying to get away from David's general, Yoav, his long curly hair gets caught in a branch. He gets knocked off his horse, right? And as he's trying to pick himself up and untangle the branches from his hair, along comes General Yoav and throws 3 spears into him and kills him. And of course, David is heartbroken. And this is the very famous line, Absalom, Absalom, my son, would that I have died in your place. You know, the son who rebelled against his father and would have killed his father, but David is still a father, you know, even then. So that's the story of, of Absalom and Achitophel. So now we have the piece. V'halo dvarim kal v'chomer. And is it not, if Ma David melech Yisrael, if in the case of David, who only learned from Achitophel 2 things, right? Nevertheless, kara'o rabo alufo miuda'o, nevertheless he called him my master, my guide, my friend. By the way, what were the 2 things that David learned from Achitophel? The Torah doesn't tell us. We don't learn it here. So the later commentaries tell us, and according to them, in the Talmud, the first thing that David learned, David one day went in to study, and Achitophel said, you should never study alone. You should always do it with somebody else. Come, let's sit down together. That was the first thing. Second thing was, one day, David walked into the sanctuary and he was all, feeling good about himself. His head was high. And Achitophel said, that's not the way you walk into shul. When you walk into shul, you have to be in a sense of awe and reverence, almost, subdued and fearful. Okay? So again, those were what later rabbis tried to impose. There's no mention at all anywhere in the Bible of what the 2 things were. But if we know that David, the great David, king of Israel, he learned 2 things from Achitophel, right? Therefore, al achad kama v'kama. How much the more so, shetzarich linhog bo kavod. If you learn from your friend a chapter, a halakha, a verse, a word, a letter, even a letter, you have to show him kavod. Shene'emar, because it says, once again in the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, kavod hachamim yin chalu, the wise, chachamim, shall inherit honor. Yinchalu, same word we just saw before, nachliel, yinchalu, they will inherit honor. And the blameless, utamimim, they will inherit tov, good things, or they will prosper. And how do we know that you will inherit good? What does that mean? And we're told, ein tov ela Torah, that anytime you see the word tov and good things are promised, it's talking about Torah. Wait a minute. All good things are Torah. The only good thing is Torah. Where does that come from? And you may remember that just before we close the ark, putting the Torah away, and right before we sing Eitz Chaim Hi, we say, Ki lekach tov natati lachem, Torati al ta'azovu. And the words mean, and this is again from the book of Proverbs, chapter 4, I give you a good doctrine, or good advice, or a good teaching. Lekach tov, I am giving you. And then, in parallel to that first part of the sentence, the second part is Torati, my Torah, do not forsake it. So since in the first half of the verse, you need to know that the essence of Hebrew, of biblical poetry, is parallelism. That the way that poetry works in the Bible is not with rhyme and not necessarily with meter, how many beats to the measure, but with parallelism. They say something and they do an A clause and a B clause. And the B clause basically repeats the A clause, but it uses synonyms. That's the essence of biblical poetry, what we call parallelism. B parallels A. A said, I have given you a good doctrine, and B says, therefore do not forsake my Torah. What is Torah parallel with? Lekach tov, a good portion. Therefore, tov equals Torah. So again, the point of all of this was if you learn Torah, engage in Torah, study in Torah, it will ultimately bring you tov, it will bring you good, or as we saw before, it will help to exalt you, to bring you up. Okay, so that's our teachings for today. I'll see you tonight at 8:30.